Hi, I'm Rob McGregor. I'm the Volunteer Development Worker at Voluntary Action Orkney, and I will be delivering this podcast today on recruiting, retaining and recognising volunteers. A volunteer will choose which organisation they want to volunteer with, but you play a huge part in selling your organisation to them and making sure they also get something from their volunteering. Otherwise it won't work. Think about what makes your organisation stand out and be positive about your work. Understanding the volunteer's motivation for volunteering is really important. There are many reasons why volunteers give their time, including learning new skills, using existing skills, giving back to the community, and volunteering is the ideal way to contribute and give something back to the community. To enjoy the experience, it should be fun, gaining work experience, feeling useful, getting out of the house, making new friends, and gaining confidence. If these needs are not met by volunteering with your organisation, then the volunteer will either move on to another organisation or into a different activity altogether. Therefore, it makes sense to find out what these motivations are and monitor how well they are being fulfilled. Do you want to target a specific audience of potential volunteers, and will that influence how and where you advertise? How are inquiries from prospective volunteers going to be dealt with, and by whom? There is nothing more off-putting for prospects than calling to offer their time and no one knowing who's recruiting or for what. Follow up. First impressions often mean that if a volunteer has left a message, email, phone or letter, and they do not get a reply promptly, you will lose them. Use your website. Upload your application pack for volunteers so that it can be downloaded by interested individuals. Keep staff and volunteers informed. Make sure that those who answer the phone and pick up the emails know what to do with a volunteer inquiry. Have some volunteer packs made up and ready to send out. Be persistent. Get into the habit of chasing up those interested parties that have requested information. They might just need a little push. If the situation's filled or not suitable, if you receive inquiries and your opportunities are filled or the inquiry is not actually suitable for the position, let them know and signpost them to the local volunteer centre. If your organisation has benefits that provided an added value to the volunteering experience, then promote them in your advertisements. For example, reimbursements for travel expenses, monthly get-togethers for staff and volunteers, etc., bespoke training and education, the chance to get qualifications, volunteer discounts, that sort of thing. Think creatively about your volunteer roles by making your volunteer roles as interesting and enjoyable as possible. Promote via as many media as possible. Use word of mouth. It's old school but still one of the most effective volunteer recruitment tools out there. Print media, such as newspaper adverts, are normally quite costly, but don't be afraid to haggle for a deal if you feel a particular printed medium would help you to target. Look into online web-based tools such as Facebook, Gumtree and Twitter. These are all free and if kept up to date can be a great way to publicise vacancies for your organisation. Paid for Facebook adverts can be cost effective and worth considering if you want to target a particular demographic. Offer to do talks and presentations about your organisation and highlight your volunteering opportunities. Contact Voluntary Action Orkney. Our service is free and opportunities are widely publicised, both online and on our volunteering summary, which goes out to local libraries, the Job Centre Plus, Skills Development Scotland, and to local employers and to existing volunteers. If you have recruited volunteers before, it's a good idea to revisit what worked and equally what didn't. Try to be flexible about the timing of volunteer involvement. Some people may need to regularly change the day that they help to fit in with their other commitments. Remember, many people are juggling work, study and family, so may need to adjust their volunteering hours as their commitments change. Look for shorter commitment and if possible more project-based tasks. Consider how you might reduce any potential barriers for prospects. Revisit your equal opportunities policy and make your volunteer recruitment as open and accessible as possible. Being flexible will help to increase your volunteer range and diversity. Make it easy for people to get involved with your organisation. VAO can help you with the administrative side by completing all the references and paperwork. Keep it simple. Try to keep the process for your organisation the same for all volunteers. Keep it straightforward and appropriate for the role that you're recruiting for. Invite the volunteer in for an informal chat so that you can meet them and tell them more about the position and answer any questions they have. If you're happy that they can perform the role and they're still interested in helping you, then set a time for them to start. Make your volunteer role sound interesting. Don't start a gardening position description with weeding. Start it with enjoy the outdoors or enjoy the fresh air. Involve your volunteers in evaluating your volunteer programme to help improve and develop it. This will benefit the next group of volunteers you recruit. Retaining volunteers in your organisation. So you've recruited your new volunteers, but how do you keep them? This section deals with how you retain volunteers for the long term with 3 crucial areas of work with your volunteers: induction, training and support, including working with volunteers with extra support needs. The volunteer induction. The induction of a new volunteer should be a planned process, allowing the volunteer time to assimilate and understand all the information that they are being given. The induction process is an important part of making volunteers feel welcome and valued. It's helpful for an organisation to have a written induction programme that is given to the volunteer when they first start their involvement. A well-planned and comprehensive induction programme helps to ensure that all volunteers are given the information, resources and support they need to work effectively within the organisation. So the induction should include the volunteer agreement, the volunteer policy, orientation and personal introductions, the volunteer task description, understanding the volunteer role, knowing where to find things, an outline of the values and policies of the organisation, who the volunteer coordinator is, health and safety issues, and the volunteer handpack. Another important element of retaining your volunteers is the development of your volunteers through training. So good training is crucial to enhancing the volunteers' relationship with your organisation. And their initial training should equip volunteers with the knowledge and skills required to carry out their role, provide a means of managing any risk, ensure that volunteers understand the relevant policies and procedures, build volunteer confidence and provide an opportunity to meet other volunteers. And it can help unsuitable volunteers to self-select out before they start the volunteer role. In-service or ongoing training. This helps a volunteer feel part of your team and ensures they meet everyone and feel welcome. It introduces to volunteers to each other, but also to other staff and helps foster relationships. It encourages volunteer input to decisions and helps to maintain standards of quality in service delivery. It keeps volunteers motivated and their skills updated, and it helps volunteers to share ideas and experiences with other volunteers and staff members. Often volunteers can benefit from a variety of training, including on-the-job training with a mentor or coach, as well as opportunities to attend external training. Planning your training. Think about the following. What is the volunteer role? How are you going to deliver the training? What information are you going to give the volunteers about the training in advance? Do you need to check what the volunteers already know? If so, how will you do this? What are the learning objectives? When are the volunteers available to participate in the training? Which training method or methods will best achieve the learning outcomes? Does the training have a stimulating balance of suitable techniques? And what are the practical requirements? Support. Supporting your volunteers is vital for their development and ensuring that they stay with your organisation. So what do you need to do to support your volunteers effectively? Regular support and supervision gives them feedback and encouragement. And make sure the volunteer knows who their volunteer coordinator is, so problems or questions are quickly and easily resolved. And show appreciation and recognition of volunteers by valuing their contribution. An effective support system will provide a means of tackling problems before they get out of hand. Support is an enabling activity that focuses on the person rather than the task, and involves giving people the space and encouragement to share thoughts and feelings, hearing what people say, being reliably there for other people, increasing the other person's self-esteem, enabling the other person to cope, and providing practical assistance. People make mistakes, and so can volunteers. Don't undercut your volunteers' confidence. Look at mistakes as learning exercises. Be flexible. Ensure your volunteers know that you're prepared to adjust their volunteer work to suit their schedules where possible. Have a review, developmental evaluation session at fixed points during the year, so your volunteers can assess their work, progress, and any training needs. Volunteers have all kinds of abilities, strengths and interests. Some are able to hit the ground running, whereas others require varying levels of support, possibly at the initial stages while they settle in. By offering some support and flexibility and making some adjustments, organisations can benefit from the skills and abilities of a huge pool of talent. There are huge benefits to involving volunteers with additional support needs for both the volunteer and the organisation. For the volunteer, it can lead to new friendships, skills, enjoyment and confidence. With the right understanding, awareness and support from volunteer managers and organisations, those with additional support needs can bring a broad and often unique range of skills and experience as committed and loyal volunteers. But what key steps can your organisation take to develop an inclusive, supported volunteering scheme? Ask the person about their areas of expertise and experience and expectations, what they would like to do, etc. Be realistic and honest. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Are there concerns about them carrying things? Are they able to talk clearly on the phone in an office? Ask about support needs and who is available to support them, but try not to focus on the barriers or limitations. Will a support worker work alongside the volunteer for a few sessions or accompany them more permanently? How does this fit in with your capacity? Will the same person come each time? Find out what the volunteer needs to make their volunteering successful. How is it best to give instructions? Can they be written down step by step? Be aware the volunteer might need extra support during the initial stages. Try to schedule regular meetings to discuss the work, possibly 5 minutes at the start and end of each session. Volunteer recognition. So this section looks at how you can acknowledge the contributions your volunteers make. When volunteers feel appreciated and important, they are more likely to feel connected to the organisation and continue their involvement. Formal recognition can include at volunteer events like Volunteers Week or Make a Difference Day, certificates for volunteers during Volunteers Week, and Saltire Award certificates for young volunteers are a great way of recognising volunteers' contributions. Accreditation, such as the possibility of working towards SVQs and NVQs, etc. Invite volunteers onto working groups. Again, if there are internal issues affecting volunteers, they should be involved in the process. Informal ways of recognising your volunteers' contributions can simply mean saying thank you, praising their good work, including them in social events, going to the pub, coffee and cake mornings, etc. Giving them the feeling of a belonging to a group and the feeling of contributing to something worthwhile. And you can just send your volunteers a simple handwritten thank you card. So we've looked at the ways you can improve your organisation's methods of recruiting, retaining and recognising the contributions of your volunteers. So you need to ask yourself, how are we doing now? So some questions to ask your organisation are: does your organisation carry out exit interviews for volunteers who leave? This can help you avoid mistakes with future volunteers. Does the information volunteers receive when they start give them a clear picture of what will be expected of them as a volunteer? Do the volunteers receive a task or role description? Are problems and issues raised by volunteers dealt with efficiently and effectively? Do you have a volunteers problem solving policy? Are you clear about reimbursing expenses to volunteers? Are there clear lines of communication within the organisation? Do the volunteers have a designated person to talk about any concerns or problems they may have? Is the volunteer coordinator manager easily accessible? Are volunteers clear about the contribution they're making to your organisation, its service users and the wider community? Poor organisation of their task and their placement within the organisation or supervision of the volunteer can lead to volunteer dissatisfaction, as can unsatisfying jobs or unclear job tasks. Lack of feedback, supervision and management, and lack of recognition, and feeling isolated and not being part of the team. Volunteers can also fear that they're going to get masses of responsibility thrown at them. Drawing up a realistic and flexible role description can help define the volunteer's purpose and goals and help avoid the above problems. So, that's the end of the podcast. Thank you for listening, and I hope it's been helpful in some way. There will be a question and answer session on December the 10th at the same time, so hopefully I can speak to you then. I've also included an extra slide with some helpful links. Volunteer Wiki. This is a resource that has been developed by Volunteer Edinburgh with support from partners to give volunteer managers access to high quality, reliable and up-to-date information on managing volunteers. Volunteer Wiki is an invaluable resource for anyone involved with volunteer management, training volunteers, working with volunteers, and has lots and lots of information that is useful to anyone in the voluntary sector. Volunteer Scotland, Scotland's National Centre for Volunteering, helps to promote and grow volunteering through partners, funders, government and policymakers, and works with others to support projects, innovation and creativity in volunteering. Again, another invaluable resource and well worth looking at to find out what's happening nationally and locally in volunteering within Scotland. And last but not least, Voluntary Action Orkney. VAO supports the third sector in Orkney by providing advice, information and practical services, and we're there for any organisation or individual who wants any advice about volunteering or advice about constitutions, funding, anything to do with the local community and the third sector. Thank you.